listening to On Reflection, the beauty podcast with a global view on beauty, hosted by me, Funmi Fetto. Today's show is brought to you by our brand partner, Paula's Choice, the scientifically proven, non-irritating, multifaceted, gimmick-free skincare brand. On this week's Required Reading, my guest is Nellie Eden, the beauty editor at Days Beauty. We're discussing Lizzo on the cover of US Vogue. Are we still fatphobic? We also discuss Kalana Barfield-Brown's recent piece in US Elle about the discrimination she faces as a black beauty editor, and holding on to the joys of wearing lipstick. Sharon Chuter joins me for Talking Points. She's the Nigerian-born, LA-based force behind Oma Beauty and Pull Up for Change, the grassroots social movement calling for accountability in the beauty industry. Now, Required Reading. So this is a section of the show where we discuss beauty news, features and topics that have caught our attention recently. Today I'm joined by Nellie Eden. She's a beauty editor at Days Beauty, she's a creative consultant, and she's a co-founder of the creative consultant agency Babyface. Nellie, welcome to On Reflection.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. So what would you like to start with?
We should start with the Lizzo story about her cover on Vogue. Such a huge moment, and there's so much going on within that conversation.
I mean, I was actually really surprised that she was the first woman of colour who is plus size to be featured on the cover of US Vogue.
I never fail to be shocked by those firsts and those statistics, especially within the beauty industry. And I don't mind, I hope that doesn't sound too cynical. For me, inclusivity or diversity is to the beauty industry what sizeism is to the fashion industry. And here's a really interesting moment where the two things are converging. It's a depressing reality that our magazine covers have never been graced by black women or dark-skinned women, let alone plus-size dark-skinned women, have to be some of the most discriminated against.
No, absolutely. One of the difficulties for me is when I see these things, you know, like you were saying about not wanting to sound cynical, and I want to embrace this and be optimistic that we are seeing a level of change, but I feel like it's a box ticker sometimes. I'm not saying that necessarily for US Vogue, of course, but I'm just saying generally in our industry, there is a lot of box ticking that goes on. And if they feel that they've covered a certain aesthetic every so often, then they've done the job. Whereas we almost shouldn't even be having this conversation.
And it's not to discredit US Vogue. They do so much amazing work. It's still a rather sanitized image of a plus size body. She looks fabulous.
You know, I think it's interesting the way Lizzo addresses this in her interview. You know, she says, and I'll quote, "I want to normalize my body and not just be like, oh, look at this cool movement. Being fat is body positive. No, being fat is normal." And I think that's the thing. We have to start looking at being fat, as she says, and she uses that word, as just being normal.
I think Lizzo definitely is like the Vogue woman. She's the new Vogue woman, totally. But until designers are really making clothes that fit her, and until beauty brands beyond the Fenties and Estee Lauders of the world are making foundations that match her skin tone, then it is a nod, it is a gesture. Until we stop having these conversations, then it's... But maybe there has to be an element of performativity until that becomes normalized.
Do you think we're scared of fat?
We are so scared of fat. We are all socially conditioned, particularly as women, although I don't want to exclude men from the conversation, to first of all fear our own bodies. We are taught to hate ourselves, and fat as this overarching, you know, it's the most dangerous body type to exist within. You're taking up the most space. And in that way, it's obviously a hugely radical, incredibly digressive and powerful statement, because all of us are subject to the pressures of advertising and social media, and everywhere we are told to loathe the skin that we're in. All of us feel like we would be a better person if we were slimmer. I'm not saying that all of us believe that. I'm saying that's the message we're sold. So I can't imagine how difficult it is, or how brave it is as an act of resistance to really love yourself as a fat person. And I love that we're using the word fat because people dance around that word. We obviously had the body positivity movement that really took force in sort of 2015, 2016 and had been happening on Tumblr before Instagram. But then it got very quickly commodified and commercialized and taken on by sort of white women whose bodies probably couldn't be qualified as anything other than kind of really pleasingly curvaceous.
That's such a good point you make, and it's something that Lizzo actually touches on in her US Vogue interview. She says, "I'm glad that this conversation has been included in the mainstream narrative. What I don't like is how the people that this term was created for are not actually benefiting from it. Girls with back fat, girls with bellies that hang, girls with thighs that aren't separated, that overlap, girls with stretch marks, girls who are in the 18 plus club." And she goes on to talk about the body positivity movement of not being particularly inclusive, saying it's a lot of white girls.
And rightfully, that outraged a whole group of women who had started or felt seen within this conversation of body positivity. And so that term no longer made sense to them because it wasn't about inclusivity. It was for a particular type of person, and that person was white and maybe between a dress size, 12 and 16, which, let's be honest, is kind of the national average.
They had essentially been cut out of the entire conversation, hadn't they?
Completely. And I think she was talking about body neutrality as a term that she favoured. And that's something that I've seen a lot online and feel really positively towards. It's about just accepting your body, that on some days you might feel really great. You might feel like you want to wear a bikini today. You might feel like you want to post a semi-nude picture on Instagram. You might just feel comfortable in the clothes you're in that day. And then also letting yourself the following day feel less confident, feeling at peace with the fact that you don't love your feet or you don't love your dress size. And that to me is a much closer representation of how I feel lots of women have relationships with their body. We're all fighting to feel ourselves. We're all trying to drown out the noise and just feel okay. It's not about feeling really, really positive, which, as we know, can be highly performative and just as kind of marginalizing online. It's not about feeling totally miserable. It's not about feeling prisoners to our bodies. It's about saying, all right, today I'm on my period and I haven't brushed my hair, but you know what? I feel absolutely fine.
I think it's quite interesting that we have magazines like, the Fat Zine, which they describe as a zine by fat people for fat people and anyone who cares about them. And I love the fact that they don't shy away from that word. Do you think that we are at a turning point? Are things changing?
The change is happening at a grassroots level amongst young people who are fed up of feeling like fat is ugly. People who are trying to reclaim fat as beautiful, as they absolutely should be. Chloe Shepherd and Gina Tonic, who do the Fat Zine, are amazing. Their whole careers as writers and image makers have been about exploring the many myriad ways in which the fat body is beautiful. And until the next generation of real influencers holding positions of power within both artistic, editorial, but also corporate environments, that's where the real change will happen. And I feel really, really sure and positive about that. But I think a change is coming.
Amen to that. Now, lipstick. There have been so many stories around the lipstick index no longer ringing true. The whole idea that in times of economic unrest, we still buy lipstick to cheer ourselves up. Of course, with the pandemic, it means we're wearing masks and lipstick sales are falling. But recently, we've seen brands like Byredo, Victoria Beckham Beauty, Lisa Eldridge, and of course, there was a huge Pat McGrath and Supreme collaboration. I'm wondering if lipstick is making a comeback.
Yeah, I was really interested to see what your take on that was as well, as somebody who always is wearing lipstick. As somebody that hasn't thought about wearing lipstick for a really long time, I've been thinking about it. And of course, that's hugely ironic because I'm spending 80% of my waking day wearing a mask. We have a tendency to minimize the cultural importance of makeup. As you said, look at this Pat McGrath Supreme collaboration. Huge. It's like, those self-owned, individually owned beauty businesses and empires are bigger and more influential than most fashion houses now. And that's incredible because they're incredibly affordable. Maybe you can't afford a piece of Supreme. Maybe you can't afford a £150 hoodie. But for most people, I know Pat's a little bit expensive, but for most people, you can go into Boots and buy a lipstick and really transform how you feel. And that's such a played out cliche, but it's so true. How do you feel when you put lipstick on?
It just makes me feel kind of alive, and it makes my face look alive. On an aesthetic level, you know, I feel it makes me look so much better and it makes me happy. You're so right. People do underestimate the power of a decent lipstick, the power of a bit of color on your face. It lifts your mood. It makes you happy. And yes, that might sound really, really basic, but I think in the time that we're in, goodness me, don't we all need a little bit of joy? I mean, I feel like I'm on a mission to get people wearing lipstick again. You know, people say to me, well, how can I wear lipstick? We've got these masks on. And I'm just like, well, get a matte lipstick that doesn't dry out your lips and get a silk mask and you're good to go.
For all the time we're spending behind a mask, we're also chatting to all our loved ones, colleagues on Zoom. And as you say, it's such a pleasure to add colour to your face. It's such a pleasure to bring that to a conversation and to really draw focus in on the mouth without sounding too pretentious at a time where we're all having to communicate through screens. It's like a fabulous excuse, you know, to kind of put some lipstick on and feel yourself, I think.
Totally. And this is going to sound really strange. I feel like I miss seeing lips and I miss seeing lips moving. We're communicating so much with masks on and we're normalizing it because I guess we have no choice but to normalize it, but it's not normal. It is such a hindrance to communication, you know, and human contact and all those things that we took for granted. When you have a moment where your mask isn't on, then just adding a little bit of color, I think that just brings a little bit of joy to what is a very strange reality that we're currently living in.
100%. And it kind of leads nicely into this, talking about lipstick. I'm talking about the Michelle Obama collab and her lipstick launch. And you posed a question, can beauty be political? We were talking about the Biden beauty blenders and the Michelle Obama launch. And I sat down and I thought about it and I thought, God, I can't separate beauty from politics. And anyone that tries to do that, I think maybe subconsciously, because we're trained to, is minimizing the conversation, the potency that beauty has to be a really physical, reactive, instant political message. Every time we decide to do our hair in a particular way or put our lipstick on, we're sending a message out into the world. And that's a kind of sliding scale of communication that goes right from conformist to radical. You know, if you decide to shave your head tomorrow, that changes everything. I remember during the Hong Kong protests when there was a ban on face masks, actually, and it kind of came full circle because they didn't want people to be able to hide their identities. And women were plaiting and braiding their hair over their faces. And I just thought, God, I have not felt so alive looking at an image for so long, because what an incredible thing to do, to use your own hair to resist identification in order to march for what you believe in.
It's incredible. And I think those images, so powerful. You know, I pose the question to you, can beauty be political or should it be political? And absolutely, I totally agree with you. I think beauty has to be political. I think it is political in its very nature, because there is no way that the way you wear your hair, the way you put color on your face, how you choose to look or beautify yourself, that does send out a message to the world as to maybe what you're thinking or what you want others to think. So it is political by its very nature. But I also do think that in this day and age, brands cannot afford not to be political. You have to stand for something. You have to be vocal about what you stand for. I don't think brands can afford to be neutral in the way that they used to be before. Consumers of all ages are shopping with their values, and it's important for brands to really pinpoint exactly what it is that they stand for. When I'm talking about politics, I'm not necessarily saying that they have to say this is the party that they vote for, but I think they do need to be clear about the issues that they stand with, and they cannot be performative about it. They have to be real about it, because this is what consumers expect from them. that's just the time we're in.
And with Michelle Obama, I think, what the Obamas have done and how vocal they are about disenfranchised Black Americans and how important it is this time around that young people from all ethnicities get out and vote. What an amazing way to do that through makeup.
Yes. What an amazing way, I think, also to use her platform.
Again, the mouth as a ever more pressing metaphor for speaking up, being heard, being visible. It's a $13 lipstick. How incredible that a lipstick could impact and affect so much change.
Absolutely. I think it totally diminishes the idea that makeup is frivolous. It's actually a very, very powerful tool. Okay, next up, a feature in Elle, USL, written by Kalana Barfield Brown. She's a high-profile fashion and beauty editor. She's actually the former beauty director at US InStyle. It's a really interesting piece that talks about her experiences as a Black woman working in the beauty industry. And obviously, as a Black woman working on this side of the Atlantic, so much of it really resonated deeply, scarily so. Tell me, why did you choose it?
I chose it because she's a fantastic writer and a fantastic beauty journalist. And the last paragraph really spoke to me. There's a moment where she says, in the beauty world, this calls for editors, publicists, marketing executives, and creative directors alike to take a good look around at the faces in the room, at the brand events they attend, at the lack of minorities on set at photo shoots they arranged. Then take a hard look in the mirror, take a moment of self-reflection, and make an honest assessment of where they stand in all of this. It may call for them to ask themselves some tough questions, like, is there anything more that I can do to make this a more inclusive industry? Have I taken advantage of the opportunities to speak out when I've noticed that there are no people of colour on the press trips? How would I feel if I were a minority trying to find my way in this industry? Have I been a part of the problem or the solution? So as a white editor within the beauty industry who has a platform, it's a conversation I totally wanted to have with you, because I know you and we met on a press trip. How many times have you walked into a breakfast and I just thought, there is no other ethnicity here except Caucasian women?
I mean, that happens so often. It's scary how normal it's become. I remember even going to an event where there must have been almost 300 people there, and I was the only Black person in the room who wasn't serving food.
I don't ever want to walk into a room where there's one Black editor amongst a sea of white faces and say, well, that's okay.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable because there are so many conversations that come up, and when they touch on those issues of race and being the only one in the room, and the fact that there are a lot of editors who are in positions where they could hire people of colour and they choose not to, it gets very uncomfortable. Those conversations are very uncomfortable for people to hear. And I still find it really bizarre that I've been in this industry now for quite a few years, and I can probably count on one hand, if that, the number of Black journalists working within beauty that are on publications.
And the thing is, they're out there. Half of my team is of colour at Days Beauty. Sure, we're a small team. We also have team members who are non-binary. We have team members who are gay, straight. That wasn't, on my account, any kind of bias in the hiring process. Those people are out there. The people very often see Days Beauty as super radical and super scary and super out there. But that's the future. That's what beauty looks like. So it only makes sense that you have a features desk who can handle those topics and reflect those conversations.
I don't even think that it should be seen as radical, out there, and even scary, because we should be reflecting what we see around us. And I think that if a lot of publications or media organizations, if they thought a little bit more about who they're hiring, it would make their content and their ways of working so much richer.
If you spoke to any of my team, they would totally reiterate everything you're saying. And I'm given a huge amount of editorial freedom at Days. So when we did a season around Black hair at the beginning of last year, my team wanted to write about it. That's their first-hand experience and knowledge. And I had to step down and say, okay, I really don't know everything here and I'm going to make mistakes. And they were laughing at me when I'm saying things that are wrong, but I'm here, I'm here to learn. And it was a fantastic season celebrating Black hair globally. It's not my place to write those stories. It's my place to facilitate a team who can write those stories. It's just so lazy. There's just so many journalists of colour in London, in the world, desperate to write these stories on their terms. So there are no excuses anymore, no hiding anymore.
I agree with you. And I agree with your point about it being down to laziness. I've seen it firsthand. You have people saying, oh, but we don't know anyone who could write this. Well, do some research. Google is great. It's your best friend, I tell people. It's really, really not that hard. You can find those people. You can find those voices. It's just putting in the work.
That's better journalism, isn't it? More polyvocal, more diverse, all of those things.
Thanks so much, Nelly. Thanks for being on this week's Required Reading.
Thank you.
This is On Reflection. I'm Funmi Fetto. In a moment, I'm chatting with Sharon Tutor, the founder of Oma Beauty. Now, every week, In Praise Of highlights the merits of 2 excellent beauty products. We'll kick off with a liquid exfoliator that might not change your life, but will definitely revolutionize your skin. It's Paula's Choice Skin Perfecting 2% BHA Liquid Exfoliant. The first time I met Paula, the brilliant walk-in beauty encyclopedia founder of Paula's Choice, I embarrassed myself. I became choked up as I told her how much this product had changed my skin and thereby my life. A force of a lady, there isn't much about beauty formulations and ingredients she doesn't know. She also welled up in gratitude, which somewhat lessens the mortification I feel whenever I recall the moment. This liquid exfoliator is possibly the one product I've recommended to most women everywhere. If there was ever an inclination that it may be discontinued, I would be thrown into chaos. I would take to the streets with my placard. It removes dead skin, gets rid of any debris in the pores, and refines the texture of my skin. Smoother, more balanced, and a healthy glow. Thanks to the potency of the bacteria-busting salicylic acid in the liquid, I'm less likely to break out when using this. It also makes my makeup-free face look 1,000,000 times better and acts as a great canvas under my serum, sunscreen, and makeup. So you can understand why I'm fanatical about this. I panic when I begin to run out. Yes, first world problems. The word game changer is overused in the beauty industry, but in this instance, it's fitting. It's the one beauty item I would insist on if I were banished to a desert island. That, and sunscreen, of course, because no one needs extra pigmentation problems. Sharon Tutor is a Nigerian-born, LA-based founder of Oma Beauty. Following the death of George Floyd and thereafter the global protests against racial injustices, many corporations, including beauty brands, posted the black box and claimed solidarity with the Black Lives Matter sentiment. For Sharon, this didn't go far enough. She set up Pull Up for Change, the campaign that pushes brands to be completely transparent about what real contribution they are making within their own companies to dismantle systemic racism. Sharon, welcome.
Oh, no, thanks for me. And once again, it's always lovely to talk to you. Your voice and the poise and the calm on it. I'm like, I can listen to you all day. But
Thank you. Thank you.
For those who are not familiar about Pull Up for Change, what it is, it's really a direct action, grassroots movement with the aim of really shining a light on the economic inequalities that face the Black communities in America and beyond. And not only shining a light, but creating a pathway to us getting some resolutions. You know, the first thing you learn in business school is about the importance of measurement. That is why businesses' KPIs work that way. That's why they create reports daily, monthly, weekly, because everything is in the numbers. It is business 101. What you do not measure, you cannot improve. This is what Pull Up for Change was. And it was, a call to consumers to go and ask these brands to release their diversity stats. Some brands simply don't do this. And beauty is unheard of, to release the number of employment. But that was so critical because until you measure it, you cannot improve it, right? So in the words of James Baldwin, not everything that's addressed can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's addressed. And this was a critical point in time to say, hey, let's talk about this and let's address this. Because, the catalyst to it, which is the second part of your question, was in the wake of George Floyd's death. I mean, everybody was in pain, everybody was hurting. I remember just this feeling of hopelessness. But in the same vein, in my personality is always, what can I do about it?
So at what point did you think that Pull Up for Change was the right way forward?
Coming back into the Instagram world, right? We live in this digital space. Seeing that for the first time, brands felt the need to respond to this or state their position. But I wasn't naive. I understood why they were doing this. I understood it had nothing to do with caring about the Black community. I remember all the tiles going up, quoting Desmond Tutu to stay silent in moments of injustice is to take the side of the oppressor. And I'm going, the white 25-year-old social media manager who posted that doesn't even know who Desmond Tutu is. We started seeing performative allyship in its best. And this is what corporates are good at marketing, right? We saw Nike, release that new campaign, don't do it. And I'm sitting there, I'm furious. Nike, you're going to take a moral ground, and we've let you with this, get away with this for years. You were always feigning to be this kind of moral, giving Kaepernick a deal. You didn't give Kaepernick a deal because you cared about what he was doing. The sneakers were going to sell out, right? So it was about conflating performative allyship with true allyship. And this is a very dangerous precedent that we were going into, because the conversation started with releasing statements and moved into donations. And then every company started outdoing themselves. I'm donating $1 million. The other one comes in and wags it out. I'm donating $5 million. And I was in such a rage to the degree that I haven't been in a long time, because I'm going, firstly, donations are not the answer.
That's interesting. Why do you say that?
It changes nothing. What's going to help you feel better is me understanding what I did, being remorseful about it, and trying to be part of the solution to make sure that never happens again, right? It's something came out of it, and something is there that you can hold on to, and not a check. And this is what companies didn't understand. It was about a check. And honestly, like I said, this is not even a team to give you $1 million check. This is a team to give you a $5,000 check. So donations are not the answer. And I think what struck me in terms of moving this conversation, in the wake of the death of George Floyd, everybody was so focused on criminal justice reform and police brutality, right? That was really the global conversation. For me, it's cause and effect, right? Police brutality is an effect. I wanted to go to the cause. If we ever have a chance of dismantling the system of oppression, we have to start focusing on the causes, right? Criminal justice reform is essential, it's critical. And the great thing was there were so many people tackling that. So it was like, great, tick. Other people are doing that work. Let me do what I know is the root cause of this. Companies sort of disassociate themselves in terms of seeing George Floyd. They say, oh, the people who are bad, the police who are bad. No. You are a key cause of it. You are the custodians of economic participation, and you have failed the Black community at a global scale. And that's why when it came to release your numbers, they all got skirmish, because it's like, oh yeah, okay, Nike, you were throwing out commercials. What does your team look like? What did we see? The data they released at management level, 77% white. Okay, it's very interesting.
So how did you find companies responding to you when you launched this movement?
At first, to be honest, we didn't know if they were going to respond. There was a part of me that expected them to do the normal, which is just do a standoff and ignore that it happened. But the good thing, that's why it was so amazing being a grassroots and a consumer movement. The momentum it built so quickly made all of them panic because, and also the stalemate of it all, or the checkmate of it all. You have just posted something saying to be silent in situations of injustice means that you're taking the side of the oppressor, which means now you have taken away the option to be silent, right? I launched this the day after what I call the Black Towel Tuesday. It's easy for companies to post a black towel. Woohoo, let's just chuck a black towel there, and it absorbs of responsibility. Now, because they had posted that black towel, my request is very simple. You posted that black towel, fantastic, I love it. Now show me how many people you employ. And this is where at first people were sort of like, oh, let's see, these companies, is somebody gonna do it first? And I really think the first companies actually moved. Milk Cosmetics moved very quickly. Elf moved very quickly as well. And obviously the Black-owned brands sort of we banded together, because a lot of them I gave them a heads up going, look, I'm doing this. And I want us to release our numbers first, and so we did. And it just started. And that's why, even on that Friday, a lot of releases happened, but it was really that Saturday, Sunday, Monday that the beauty community went into chaos, because some of them thought they were going to ride it out. And then immediately they started, and especially the big guys started seeing other of their major competitors releasing. They were like, okay, and these are the conversations I had much later on with a lot of the executives there. They were like, look, we were just defeated. It was like the jig's up. We have to, this is just where it's at. This is what the consumers are demanding. We need transparency. It is vital. And to be honest, a lot of them were just like, look, we never saw it that way. We just come into work and we do work. And when we look at diversity, we look at it as a whole, females and all people of color, which I think is very insulting the way even companies bundle that together. So the white is the only people worthy of a standout mention, and everybody, people of color, all of you others, yeah, in some compliment, we have you, and so, so, that was the tea, so a lot of them, I think this is why this was such a shock to people's system in terms of the companies, because one, it was the vulnerability. They had never had this level of call for transparency. Look, everybody's numbers was bad. So at a point, people just were like, look, there's no shame in that. We just part and parcel of the system. And I think that's what's powerful about this is it now gives us a baseline to which we now can track improvements. I mean, once company puts out a number, they want to beat it every year. That's what's sent the world into all this trouble and global financial crisis, companies needing to grow every single time. So at least this is for a good cause. And I think that's what I've been really pleased in terms of shining a light on this matter and educating the whole world that Black economic inequality is a pandemic level. It is a human rights crisis, and it's one that we have to take very seriously if we want to live in a truly integrated society, a society where we start dealing a blow to racism. Is going to happen from true integration.
And so where do we go from here? Because you've now had so many of these companies respond.
Yes.
And they are transparent about their figures.
Yes.
And so on and so forth. But what is the next step? Because, of course, they can release their figures, but if we don't actually have any tangible steps as to how things are going to change, then it's perfunctory.
So even look at tech, right? Technology companies have released diversity reports for years, right? And it hasn't been a biggie, right? Even though their numbers look abysmal. But the key is when they release these things, it's in the investor relations, in the legal tiny notices, and then another tiny notice there and another tiny notices. So it's information that's out there, but nobody can find or nobody has put attention into, right? So I'm like, you guys have been releasing your information. I'm angry that I published it in a format that people can actually read. And I think that's a part of what we've done and why this is making companies truly want to change their ecosystem, because it's now bringing this into a consumer, no longer about investors caring about this. This is consumers voting with their wallets.
So what advice would you actually give to consumers?
Do not buy where you will not be hired. Simple. And then do not buy where your friends, the ones you love, the people you care about are not going to be hired. If consumers continue a standoff against companies with their dollars, we will see change. And that's where the focus really needs to be, in educating the consumers that you have the ultimate power. Look at within beauty ecosystem. Vegan products were unheard of. That was some sort of hippie shit like 10 years ago. You have to be like a real hippie and then go find some really tiny, dodgy little store to find yourself a product that was vegan, right? Look at it's now like a benchmark. Every brand, every product is vegan. Why? Because the consumers voted with their dollars, cruelty-free. Apparently, we could not release lipsticks if animals didn't have to go through the motion, right? Who tests on animals anymore? It's actually becoming completely obsolete. It's only if you're selling in China that conversation comes up. It is just now a new benchmark because the consumers had this stand up with brands. And if you're not cruelty-free, I'm not going to buy. So the power ultimately lies with the consumer. And that's the power of this movement, changing that narrative to go, no matter what blue ha-ha we sing to our companies, internally, is not going to change nothing. Companies respect one thing and one thing only, and that's the dollar. And if you threaten that dollar, they will do anything to give you that dollar. So how about we actually use our wallets to drive change? It's the easiest thing to do.
Sharon, I couldn't agree more. The point you make about consumers having the power to enforce change, we absolutely have the power.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. Thanks to me. Bye.
Now, our next in praise of. Chanel Ultra Wear All Day Comfort Flawless Finish Foundation. In recent months, I've barely worn foundation, and then the heat wave happened, and then I got a tan. Yes, I did wear SPF, and yes, black people also tan. So when I tried my usual foundation shade, it no longer suited my skin tone, but neither did others in my repertoire. Suddenly their textures didn't feel right, too heavy, not particularly malleable, because I didn't keep them in a cool enough place. This is the death knell of a decent foundation. So I sought a new one. Whatever your foundation requirements, I'm a great believer that it has to feel like great skincare. This recently launched Silky Texture Delight by Chanel does that with aplomb. It is completely weightless, I forgot I was wearing it, and it made my skin look and feel divine. The 30 shade range has a luminous matte finish, ideal for those with oilier skin who find dewy foundations too shiny and matte foundations too lackluster. As it's formulated with a perfect skin complex, it is heat, humidity, and sebum resistant, and touch-ups are unnecessary. Other things to note, it has a scent, but it's really subtle. While the shade range isn't huge, it is balanced and there are options for different undertones. If one of the tenets of a great foundation is that it causes people to say, "Your skin looks amazing," as opposed to, "I love your foundation," then this is a really great foundation. And that's On Reflection this week. You can find us on socials, that's ORB Podcast, or head to orbpodcast.com, where you can contact us with questions, comments, and any beauty dilemmas, and we will try to feature them on the show next week. Huge thanks to my brilliant brand partner, Paula's Choice, the last word in efficacious, gimmick-free skincare products, and you can find them at paulaschoice.co.uk. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next week. On Reflection is a Battersea Podcast production.